Welcome back to season 2.5 of Finding Common Ground, and we are in episode 3 of our 6-part limited series, Leading from the Messy Middle. If you have been here for the first 2 episodes, befriend your imposter syndrome and know what you don't want, it is about time for you to put your worth on the table. And for that, we have a really exciting guest that I'm going to allow Azrin to lead the way. Who's here with us?
So we have Nabilah here. Nabilah is the editorial lead at Kontinentalist, and I think why we're excited to have you here is that you are relatively new to this role, the middle manager role. So I think there is that double layer of figuring out what the role means to you, but also having to learn how to manage a new team, but also while doing all of that, putting your worth on the table, your team's worth on the table, and it's a lot lah. It's a lot separate to your day job. So I think starting off, what I was curious about to hear from you and what you shared with me in our separate conversation as well is what this middle manager role is. What does it look like to you? Or what do you find is an important Nabilah essence to include into it?
Wow. I'll try and tackle the first question first, I guess, because the Nabilahness of it is
Ongoing, yes,
work in progress. Thanks so much for having me on this episode. I think the middle manager role is a really interesting thing that I didn't think that I was stepping into. When I applied for the job, the first thing I saw was editorial lead. Right. Yeah. So there's a sense of you're leading a team. Yeah. And that was very attractive to me because it's something that I was very new to. I usually work quite on my own, like independently. Even in a team, we would be very independent in how we worked. Yeah. So that was instantly attractive to me. But it was only when I stepped into Kontinentalist that I realized, oh, you're actually in the middle of not in the middle of the organization, but you are managing a team, but you're also managing some your boss or like your superiors, whoever they are. And Kontinentalist is quite special as well because it's essentially quite a flat hierarchy that we have. So just thinking more about it as like you're in the middle of something that's flat is also quite ironic almost, but it comes out quite naturally from just having to manage downwards and upwards, I guess, to put it in a simplistic way, even though we don't see it in that way usually in Conti.
So what's the generational thing that you are navigating? You are millennial, Gen X?
Yes, I'm millennial.
You're millennial managing millennials?
I'm millennial managing mainly Gen Zs. There are some millennials, but I don't know. I tend to see them all as Gen Zs, which is probably very wrong of me. I shouldn't see it.
Are you
so
an older millennial?
Yes, I am. I'm what they now jokingly call the elder millennial.
Oh, is that what it's called?
Yeah. It's a thing. You're an elder millennial.
Yes, I'm an elder millennial.
Okay.
Which I think is a good thing because I feel like it comes with some wisdom or to me some work experience, which I do have. But so sometimes things come out quite generationally. So the team that I manage, mainly Gen Zs, but also there are some millennials. But so Heng, who we all interviewed, is my manager, and she's also a millennial. And I don't know whether I should say this, but I'm older than her. I'm actually older than her. And sometimes that weirdly becomes my own personal hang up. I'm I'm in the middle, but I'm the oldest. And oldest and woman is always a thing, right? It's always a insecurity or something. So that tends to be in the background for me when I'm interacting with my colleagues. I'm I'm the oldest in this office. In a bad way. I'm I'm out of touch or, so it does play out actually.
Yeah, and I think that's the element, right, of you feeling oldest in the team, but at the same time, newest in the role.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Then it's there's a lot to figure out in the moment.
Exactly. So when I applied for the role, I actually thought, I told Azrin this, I thought I wouldn't get it because I was do I actually have enough experience to be in this role, to manage a team. Managing a team is definitely very new. So that was the part that I was like, not sure if they would see merit in that. But I was also dealing with like that imposter syndrome of like, do I have enough transferable skills to bring something to this role that's... and it's weird, because you want to fit into the company quite seamlessly, but you also want to like make your own mark. So it's like, I felt like there was like a switch where initially I was like, okay, I'm just gonna fit into like the last like gap that was filled and do everything quite in a similar way, especially if there's workflows already established, which Conti does have very clear workflows. But at a certain point I was like, okay, but what can I add to this role? Because it doesn't make sense to just do things as they are. And things change all the time as well. So then it was also like, okay, what new things can I do? But but I shouldn't rock the boat. So it's like weird things to kind of like navigate at the same time.
Yeah, I feel that a lot because it's always the matter of why make things harder for yourself if there are processes already in place, if things are already done and settled. And again, if you have a team that you're coming into, then they're already used to a certain way of doing things. So why, if you're already like kind of figuring things out, this additional workload is stressful or can be stressful, but at the same time could be good in the long run because you are putting your flavor onto things.
It's part of the learning curve as well. So what you were talking about, like being the newest on the team, it's not just about new, but so Kontinentalist, we focus on like data visualization, right? That's completely new to me. So on some level, I'm like, okay, you all are all the experts. Like I'm the one who doesn't know anything. And so a lot of times I'll be like, trying to learn from them. But then I was also very cognizant, like, okay, but I'm also a leader in this organization. Like, what can I do to lead? Like, what can I do to also show that, like I have some skills to bring to the table as well. And that's about, how do I put my worth on the table while also aware that I don't know so many things about this industry. So
I'm as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing actually the middle managers sort of like existential struggle, right? Between managing and leading, actually, because managing is all about let's just work within the boundaries and parameters of what I've been given, because there's more than enough to cover, and let's just assume that the boundaries that have been defined are worth keeping as it is, right? And then you got to like figure out like, so these irritations or frustrations I'm feeling about the current status quo, is it worth talking about or not? And that comes from your own values, right? Of like, is this worth it? Like, am I worthy enough to raise it up? Maybe I'm just the stupid one here. And that's actually honestly the leadership struggle, because the work of leadership is about it's about let's question or challenge the current boundaries of things. And maybe after the debate, we'll leave it as it is. But maybe after the debate, we will move the markers, because that's exactly what leadership is. Like, this is worth doing, this is not worth doing. This is worth talking about, this is not worth talking about. And that's, I feel, the big shared struggle of leaders, quotation mark, and managers. Right? Managers are learning to lead, and leaders are learning to help everybody else lead as well.
I think hearing you put it in those words, I'm thinking, makes sense. Every day is a struggle of like, am I managing? Am I leading? Am I managing? Am I leading? Is this worth leading? Is this, or should I just manage it? So every day is just like a constant like tug of war between two identities.
And that is the polarity that every professional worth their salt and wanting to work for a long time will end up doing their entire life. Like, sometimes it's managing and sometimes it's leading, and
oh my god, it doesn't end.
No, it does not end.
This is just like the first chapter.
It doesn't end. But I guess like in the middle management role, and I have to say I've never really been in one, partly because like I've only been running my own business. So by sheer default, if you're a founder, you'll have to occupy like the top seat. And taste like a bit of middleness, but never in its purity. But I just work off the assumption that if I'm in the middle, there is that there probably is that existential, do I get to question? Do I get to challenge the boundaries?
Yeah.
Whereas the leader at the top / founder is like, by sheer default, you're the one who set it. And then your crisis is, did I set it correctly? And why does everyone think like I know the best here? But I got to make a decision. So I don't know. I speak as a leader that's why I actually am okay and enjoy like push back quotation mark from middle managers, because I do need someone to spar with about like whether this is okay or not. And I wouldn't know. Yeah,
and I think hearing you say that, right, like having somebody to spar with and have a conversation about, I find myself thinking about how, while it's a developmental skill set, right, to learn to move from management to leadership, if you will. And I've shared this quite a bit in this 6 series, because this is the season that I'm in my career, that it does require a big emotional labor, mental capacity to do that work of shifting between managing and leading. Because it's of course very easy to say, hey boss, I will do whatever you want me to do. And I can do it well, I can do it perfectly. But then it's a very different thing to say, how about all these ideas instead? And how about I do all of that and this is because I think it's worth. So it's almost like those invisible bullet points on the JD, And I feel almost myself right now in this moment feeling like, am I worth less because I'm choosing to just manage and not lead? Yeah. And is that really fair for me to say? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about a couple of things at the moment. So the first is like accountability that you have as a manager or leader. I think it's very easy to maybe just go through the motions, problem solve on a very kind of small level and like not bring, let's say, the learnings forward. But I feel like in Conti, there is a lot of autonomy that's given to so all the team leads, of which I'm one. To not just spar, but also to like do a lot of things on our own. And then obviously that comes with accountability, because like, when you suggest something, your team has to do it. And, do you have their buy-in? Is this actually like giving them more work than they signed up for? Is everyone kind of like, haha, happy, but actually, not, so there is a lot of like, when you're introducing something new, the accountability is on you to actually think like, is this actually worth it? And then at the end of the day, if you sit with like your manager and they're like, so like, what do you think about this thing? You also want to be able to make a good account of yourself to be like, this thing actually worked or not, or, and that's a kind of like constant, like iterative kind of work in progress. I think the other thing is, the emotional labor part.
I got caught by that phrase too.
The emotional labor part, the invisible parts of your JD. I think in my initial like few days in Conti or like few weeks, I remember telling someone like, oh my God, like I don't have a lot of things to do at the moment. So I feel like, wow, I have a lot of time to plan and I can like strategize about like stuff. And they're like, yeah, that's great. And then that lasted all of like 1 week or something, because honeymoon period, you just joined. So people haven't given you like a lot of work. And then the moment you're busy, then you realize like, wow, I have less time to do a lot of the softer parts of the thing, but I also include strategizing and planning. I don't know whether that's really soft. But the emotional labor is part of that, like tacked on to that thing that doesn't get put into Google calendar invites, So in your day, I often I hate days where there's like meetings back to back, because there's actually no time to do the other things that are equally important. That's more about taking care of people and like taking, not just taking care of people, but just seeing how people are doing or how a project is doing. And how a project is doing is usually a question of how are people doing. And I find like that becomes something that lengthens your work day, or you think about it after you knock off work or during dinner or before you sleep. And then that tires you out a lot.
Now, I was just thinking about like, well, two things. So one is the idea that there is the creator's way of managing their time. How do you say that? How you block out your time on a calendar?
Yes.
Right. And the creative generally needs like a half day to create stuff. Right. And then there is what they call the manager's schedule, which is like back-to-back slotted meetings. Right. And I read somewhere where creative managers actually have to look at their work week and decide which are the designated creative days where it's blocked out half days to just create. And then like the meeting stuff, which is like quite task oriented. And I was just like wondering about this whole like emotional labor stuff, right? Like, do you see that fitting under more like the creative? I kind of need like half a day to like fully like relate to people, or does like that emotional labor people work actually fit under the
Some
2 hour
things,
kind of things?
Yeah. I don't think it's creative work. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't think it is creative work.
Okay.
It's usually relationship managing work. Some of it does get scheduled. Like so I do check-ins with like all my team members every month.
Yeah.
But everything else becomes like a lot more informal.
And
it comes with like listening first.
Yeah.
Or just observing, I guess. And then knowing when to schedule like a quick call with like a colleague who's unsure about something.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't say that they're unsure. You hear it from something that they say during another meeting. And that involves having to find the pockets of time. But I don't know what they're called. They're usually called like quick calls. Quick calls to check in. Just want to check in.
Sync ups.
Because I think even a check-in, which usually takes about an hour, can feel quite
draining.
No, I mean not just draining,
it's
but
work.
it sounds very formal as well. And sometimes I feel like, like a scheduled check-in can sound very draining. You're like, okay, what am I going to say? What's that? Like, what do you want to talk about?
Yeah.
And to some extent, like I wish we were all like back to office quite like, in the regular pre-COVID way, because then it could be get a coffee, go for lunch. But now things have to be scheduled.
Yeah.
So that's a bit, and I have teammates who are not in Singapore as well.
Yeah.
So, things have to be done on Zoom.
Yeah.
And that's of course like not great for, certain like organic kind of interactions. So you just have to kind of create the informalness by like how you say things and how to word things and making people feel comfortable. And that takes work as well.
Yeah.
I guess from a leader's, a top, let's say top management standpoint, one of the good things about officially declaring it's a check-in or a schedule is it's almost like a validation that is work and it's worth putting on the cal. Whereas, you don't put like 15-minute drink coffee in a coffee shop. That's treated as it's not worthy of mention in a way.
Yeah.
Even though like that could very well be where a lot of good things are happening.
Yeah.
And I actually would be very curious about anyone who's in the people managing side of stuff, like whether they would actually what will happen if you actually bracket that out and schedule it and actually talk about what you achieved through it. Yeah, because if you just said, I had like coffee with a bunch of like colleagues this entire week, it can feel like, did you do any work? Or did you just drink coffee with people?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess that's the whole like emotional labor is informal labor, if you like. Whereas like formalizing it helps to validate it and put some worth to that. Yeah. And I guess what we haven't really talked about much, I think in the episodes, is also about gender. And I'm very struck that on the CG side, it's a predominantly female team.
Yeah, same with Kontinentalist.
Yeah, same as Kontinentalist. And actually quite a few of the teams in Common Ground are run by women who are fully appreciative of like emotional labor and like we do see the work involved in it, but I'm really wondering about like what would be the experience of someone working maybe in a more dude-dominated organization. Like, would it be that easy to put your worth on the table? Like the I drink coffee with the teammates and keep them together so they don't kill each other work.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I can't speak for dudes, but I also think it's a product of our time, right? Because so now I feel that workplaces are probably, there's a lot of Gen Zs now. Yeah. So certain kinds of management styles may not fly anymore, or you may not be motivating them in a way that we used to be motivated by, I suppose. Yeah. Or me and Azrin spoke a little bit about how like when you were in like your early jobs, you may have experience certain like toxic, kind of like workplace cultures and just kind of swallowed it, to get by or, for the paycheck or whatever, or for the experience. And there's a move to actively go against that and like create a better workplace environment, and that might be why it's like you want it to be nurturing, you want to make people feel cared for, and there's a kind of blurring between personal and work at the moment, I feel, maybe because of COVID and people working from home. So you kind of want to emulate like a nice, caring workspace. And you're right, I think women employees, or women in general, like appreciate the emotional labor or appreciate caring for people and making people feel heard. But it, I guess, takes a toll that you don't really account for or realize. Like when you think about, I don't know, balance sheets or whatever, it doesn't feel like it's talked about enough.
Yeah, it's energy spent. Yeah, and I'm thinking about the team that we have and we worked with, and whenever we each have something that we're going through, we can very easily go to somebody else. And that privilege of having like a woman-dominated team is that we know for sure you are going to listen and hold that space for me, and we know that you are going to be able to reflect what I need in that moment. You're not just going to be like, oh, okay, nice, thanks. Or like, I'm not going to feel unsafe around you. And not to say that I feel unsafe around men, but I don't know if I would come to men,
like a male manager.
A male manager with the same troubles in the same way that I do with my female managers. Yeah, and I don't know, is it because it's just a stereotype, or is it really something that we have innately as skills to be nurturing, to be caring? And that's why we're almost like conditioned for us to use those skills in the workplace, because we see that gap and we see that need. And that makes me think about how if other people don't see that need or don't have that skill, do they just have freed up energy to do something else that is related and is celebrated for their work and their role that might get them further ahead?
No, I think it's helpful to call it, okay, for lack of a better word, to call it either like these very technical or male-sounding titles might validate it, Like, I mean, okay, but when I think of the example, I remember, like, okay, we keep talking about Nuru, our teammate, who needs to be on this podcast soon.
Season 3.
Season 3, right? But when Nuru first started working for me, as like sort of like a beginner middle, right? And as she developed, and I asked her like what did she want to do, she said like, I'm very interested in working on like managing people and like taking a look at the processes and all that kind of stuff. And I remember in the first few years before I gave her a title that used those terms like process development and people development, for a while, I can't remember the title that she had. It was like something more general, but she was doing the work already.
Yeah.
But I remember she would ask like, am I doing the work that you hired me for? As in a question mark, or like, are you sure this is the work?
Yeah.
Like, or should I be doing like other work? And I remember having to assure her like, this is the work, like because you do that stuff, looking after the process and looking after the people and talking to people for many like conversations about stuff. I don't have to do that labor, and that's the justification for your salary and your worth and all that, So when it came down to like, okay, time for promotion, what is the title? Like I thought like head of people and process development is like a very like power title,
Yeah.
as opposed to like, I don't know, like head of Oh dear, I'm gonna get like so much from HR. Head of HR doesn't sound very power punchy these days.
Yeah. No.
Unfortunately for HR, there is not a lot of good acknowledgement of what is the worth of HR. Right? And HR is very female dominated. And actually my big wish is like, maybe we should just like up the HR game, right? And I would love HR leaders out there who are women to put more of their worth on the table. Yeah, because the big debate down there is like, how come we don't have a voice at the C-suite table? Yeah. Anyway, I digress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this is like simplistic, but I was thinking about like how in Conti, there are some workflows that have been automated.
Yeah.
And the efficiency like frees you up to do a lot of other things. And I really love it. So for example, like instead of, if there's a draft of a story, instead of me having to, let's say, send you an email or even send you a link and like say stuff. And it's the saying stuff that takes a long time. It's crafting the email that sometimes takes a long time. So we just have like literally a button and then we just send a link and no niceties needed, and it's a very small thing, but because we do it like across the entire process, it saves up so much time for maybe the more important work to be done, which could be the relationship building thing. So for me, I'm like also thinking about what are the parts of the work that I enjoy, because if you ask me about the relationship building part, it actually is enjoyable. And if I were to work in another workplace where, I don't have to interact with anyone, like I'm the only person, lighthouse controller, operator, I would be probably, some parts of that sounds interesting at the moment, but I think I would actually be quite miserable because, that's just not what I'm attracted to as well. So it's one of those weird things where you enjoy it. But it's just kind of like, how do you take care of yourself so you're not overextending yourself beyond like your capacities, and also knowing when to like reach out to your manager to be like, okay, this is too much, there's a problem, because it's also about highlighting like when do you go to your manager with a bigger problem that you need their help versus trying to do it on your own and manage it with your team.
Yeah, I resonate a lot with that part of like, oh yes, I do enjoy it, but also like, it is work to be done. And I feel that deeply because I'm also a very relational person. Introverted, but relational person. So there's a cap or limit to what I can put on the table and offer. So I think sometimes, while as we slowly start to come back into office, everything starts to be physical again. Sometimes you slip into these conversations. And while you are supporting a peer through something that they might be going through, what I'm learning right now is how do you put a boundary around what's yours and what's mine, and how can I support you without internalizing that for myself. So that is also kind of a big part of the skill sets that I'm trying to learn right now. Yeah,
that's leadership skills.
Yeah.
It is, because it's defining boundaries. And boundaries are essentially what is worthy to me right now and what is not as worthy. And of course, that's a trigger point, right? Because we are having competing ideas of what is okay, not okay, what is worthy, not worthy. But the courage and the honesty and the generosity to have those kind of conversations, I think that's what actually helps you build not only the sense of worth in your own voice, but also the worth, your worth to the organization, because it's a lot more visible. And I guess the struggle for the top is trying to see what is the worth that people are bringing to the table. And then like, how do we make that more visible? And it's a bit of a two-way thing, right? Yeah. I don't know, like what opens up for both of you? Because I see both of you looking very pensive now.
I think what I'm thinking about is how, while the tops are trying to help me, the middle, put my worth on the table, I need to be forthcoming with that worth. And while I internally may know or not know what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I want to grow into and stuff like that, I know for me, I may not be always sharing that. So then there's no data point out there for anyone to work with, because it it comes out in different ways. It comes out in smaller ways or slower ways. So by the time that the news breaks out, or that this is actually what I want to do, or this is what I hope to achieve, then a lot of pre-planning could have been done for that to happen.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm appreciating from this conversation is that we're giving language to a very invisible part of the work, of the part of the transition.
Yes.
That you're not just learning the skill sets to be a manager, but you are also learning what your worth is, and then learning to articulate that.
Yeah.
And then learning to help your team put that on the table as well. So I right now don't have a team, but I think a big part of my work is managing that relationship between my peers and my top. Yeah, and top is Shao lah.
Hi.
So no bottoms, but I would imagine that's also added energy for you, because you do have a bottom, you do have sideways, and then you would have a top.
Yes.
And clients.
Yes, and clients and partners as well. I was also thinking about visibility and articulating your worth, right?
Yeah.
And initially I thought, well, I'm not sure if I don't think it anymore, but sometimes there's a tension between elevating the team that you're managing.
Yeah.
And maybe because you're in the middle, and like the middle is prone to disappearing into the mess.
Yes.
To sometimes realize like, oh, your worth needs to be visible as well and articulated as well. And it's not always okay to just blend into the background, thinking that, okay, my team is what comes first, kind of thing. So that's something that can be hard.
Yeah.
And then in Conti, because we are a publication as well, so the team that I manage write stories. A lot of them are writers and they write stories.
Yeah.
And I'm also a writer. So sometimes I'm also like, ooh, when do I write a story? And when do I have a byline out there where people can see my work? Because that is very visible to a lot of people outside the organization. And I've been at Kontinentalist for a year now. And I've written one story. And it sounds really pathetic. Like, it's like, oh, you wrote one story? But I'll be like, but I was also trying to explain to people like, yeah, but we publish all these other stories and I was also part of them, but like in a more invisible role.
Yeah.
And I was sharing with Azrin that in Conti, in the media industry or journalism, you often just see the byline of who writes the story. So at Conti, we do a lot more than that, where we highlight the entire team. But it was relatively recently that we started also including the editors of the story, of which there's a few of us who are usually part of the editing process, and that takes a lot of time. And we usually significantly shape the story with the writer and the other members of the team as well. And it was only recently that it was credited, like the editors were credited. And I remember asking Peng like, oh, like how come this one we put? And then she was like, oh yeah, because I remembered to do it for this story. I think it was her story.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about it and I was like, why can't it be for all stories?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't, as in, I feel like it's a holdover from the media industry, like the usual way of doing things.
Yeah.
Where the editor is quite invisible.
Yeah.
So when you read like Straits Times, you don't know who edited the story, you know? And I don't know whether it matters or not, but the editor actually shapes a lot of their story, usually the headline, for example, or the choice of photo or something. So I kind of felt that especially in Conti and the way we work, being collaborative, like the visibility of the editor's role should be highlighted, at least like on the same level as everyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way of recognizing the value of the editor.
Yeah, I think when we call this episode like put your worth on the table, it's easy to just assume, okay, it's about like the financial worth, like, you know, asking for a bigger salary and all that. But it's not just about like what is the monetary value of my work, but it's also the worthiness of my name, you know, it's the worthiness of what's the title of the work that you say that I do. And so for me, like invisibility, unless it's a choice thing, it doesn't work for you in the field of work. Because if someone has never met you before, all they know of you is what you describe on LinkedIn or your resume and all that, right? So that requires visibility. And I mean, I remember like when we did our those like community resource guides.
Yeah.
You know, like we did these research projects and we put out like free resource guides, and there was a lot of labor involved on like who researched it, who interviewed people, and who wrote it. And what was not okay for me is there's a lot of resource guides out there that are anonymous. That means it's just there and then it's just the company brand's name, you know?
Right.
And I thought like that's not very fair. So like even for our resource guides, like anyone who played a role, whether they were even just the intern staffing, the thingy, or someone who did interview, like everyone is credited for what was the work that you did. Yeah, because it's important that you put your name there. And I remember like not everybody understood like, don't need to put my name there. It's like, no, you should. You must put your name there if you felt that work was a worthy one that you did. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I'm guilty of that. Like invisibility. I don't know what about it, but it's just not wanting to be, I don't know, associated, or I don't know what that relationship is about. But I remember when I made that transition to lead of stratcoms, right? Prior to that, I was a trainee. I was the traineeship, and I was under the traineeship for SG United. That was peak COVID, you know, that was what the offer was then. And when Shao offered the lead of stratcoms role, I remember feeling so incredibly imposter syndrome, because who the heck would think that I could do this role? And it was such a reach from traineeship, right? So I remember almost not wanting to accept that, because I knew that while I was doing that work anyway, the title put an additional pressure on everything. It's like suddenly... And it's a weird thing, because while you can do the same thing, suddenly if someone places a label on it, I don't know why, if you experience this, but I feel the need to almost like double the effort. It's like I need to now prove it ×2 that I deserve this role.
Yeah.
Even if I got the role because of like the potential and like what I was doing. So I think I had a similar conversation with somebody when we were talking about how, you know, if you ask for something, it's almost like a mutual exchange of value. But why can't it be? It wasn't a mutual exchange of value, sorry. If you ask for something, if they say yes, you almost have to give like double back. And it's not like a 1-to-1 or like even less, but it's almost like you have to give more than you are.
As in this for managers or like in general?
It was in general,
Wow.
but I'm thinking how that parallels to this in a sense that it's not like a promotion and maybe a bigger JD or whatever, but suddenly I feel the need to do more, and I feel the need to be more, even though it may not be an expectation or an explicit request. Yeah.
Actually, I have a different experience from you, because like it's the reason why I wanted to be editorial lead in Kontinentalist is because like my previous job, I was an editor, and I was looking for like what's next, like what is progression for me, and I couldn't find anything within my organization, and I wanted to grow in a certain way, and so for me like naming things in a very specific way was very useful. In even like thinking about my own worth to myself, because you know, like, I mean, obviously, like when I applied, I didn't think I could get it. But then the moment I got it, I was like, oh, wow. Like, so I do have what it requires. I can contribute to, you know, so it actually gave me some comfort. But of course, it comes with like pressure and expectations. And I think that's quite normal. Although I totally like resonate in like trying to over deliver and like do like such a great job. So one of the things that I slowly started to learn in Kontinentalist is you don't need to give like your perfect work from the start. Like it's okay to do like good enough, because there's more time to then like iterate and work on things and make mistakes. So and that sounds really simple right now, but it's actually quite difficult for me because I'm a perfectionist. So I tend to procrastinate because I want to create the perfect product and give you the perfect thing. But I'm starting to learn like that may not be very helpful in an organization where everyone else is kind of waiting for you for, you know, like to play a certain step in a role. So it's like, it's quite interesting to be like, If you think about it in that way, then I don't end up over-delivering because I just do the thing that's required because it's like passing a ball. You know, you don't need to like do extra dances before you do. You know what I mean? Like you just need to pass the ball at this moment. Even if you drop it, it's fine. You know what I mean? So then I think about it in that way and I'm happy.
Okay. It's quite existential, right? Because it makes me think about how does something have to be perfect for it to be worthy? You know? Like, or is it like it's worthy enough even with the imperfection? Or in its imperfection, there is a worth to it. Because perfection doesn't even exist anyway.
Yeah.
You know, but I guess maybe the struggle of the perfectionist is the only when it's X, then I am worth something.
Yeah.
Or only when it's X, then it's worth putting out there. Yeah.
It's the Asian context thing, right? Like, I feel it's quite hard to break out of you must get A, then you get a present, or you know what I mean? Then you can go holiday. I don't know, or whatever. It's like your value is tied to, or you know, in the education system especially, it is tied to like your output, and you need to work harder. And I was thinking about this, talking about this with my friends. You know how like before you do your A levels or O levels, there's the prelims, but the prelims they make it so hard that you will end up like failing or something. But then like, even though you feel, your teacher will be like, no, actually you will get A. Why do you want to put people through like the terrible anxiety, and like they feel they have to work so hard.
Oh
and then,
gosh.
And then actually,
oh my goodness,
you know, I find that a very weird system. I don't know if they still do it. But it puts you in a certain mindset, and that might actually be what you carry forward in.
Oh, that's so toxic.
As an adult.
Toxic Asian habit of like, the worse you think of yourself, the better you will perform. It's like, okay, like, to some degree, but not very helpful.
Beat yourself up to be like the...
Yeah, I think on the note of like good enough, right? I think what I discovered for myself in the past year or so is that the good enough script isn't what resonates for me. Because I realized that I don't operate from a deficit. So I don't have to work harder to be like 100, but I know that I can do better and be more. So then I'm operating on like, okay, my baseline is bare minimum, but I can be more and I can be better. So I think that also kind of shifted the script for me, because I remember a conversation I had with you, Shao, and you were asking me like, okay, what is good enough? What is good enough? And I had that same convo with Nurul because I was having an existential crisis of perfectionism and like, I just cannot do things fast enough lah. So then I realized that, okay, good enough is not good enough. It's sufficient. It can be better, but it doesn't have to be. And I can spend that additional effort, energy, time on, if not work, I can spend it on myself. And so I don't need to go home thinking like, oh, I can make this one change and everything will be so much better. But it's okay and it's fine. It can be more, but it doesn't have to be. Yeah,
because other things deserve to be more as well.
Yeah. So it's like, it's not a deficit, it's a surplus.
I think I operate from a deficit. Now you're making me realize that. But no, but I also like think about like, so as a manager, right? And I'm sure like as like y'all maybe will resonate. Like you're also, I often think of it as juggling balls, and work is just like one ball that you juggle, and you probably juggle a few, and then there's like home life and like other things. And I always feel like I don't know why, but I always feel like you cannot juggle all of them perfectly every time. So for me at least, I always feel like one is usually slightly, and but I think it was in your course that like we were talking about how it's okay to notice that and then like correct, kind of like course correct and do something else about it. So it's fine to not be operating like perfectly all the time or even like better than perfect, because I feel like something's got to give, because you have limited energy, you have limited time, and like you also make choices and trade-offs. So I mean, I don't know. I'm still thinking about your deficit thing, but not everything can be perfect, and I'm starting to live. I'm starting to accept it as being okay. And for me, I thought about it a lot during the pandemic, because sometimes I had not a lot of work to do, and I'd be like, I'll be very demotivated to do work, and then turn in work that's just like okay. And I used to like beat myself up over those kinds of things, but now I'm like, no, like I forgive myself if I don't do well today, and then tomorrow will be a different day.
I think at the negotiating table with your top and with your peers, I mean, putting your worth on the table is also putting what's worthy for you on the table right now. You know, and it could be like my mental health is of worth right now. Time with my kid is right now worthy for me. And all of those things are of equal worth to talk about, and it's not just about salary and like titles. Those are very important to talk about, but so is everything else. Of course, that decision of which one is the worthy one to talk about right now is like the existential thing that all of us have to like sort of like navigate, right? And I mean, you sharing about like all these like balls that we're juggling, it makes me think of like a pretty famous analogy of you know, you're juggling balls. Everyone is, that's true. But some are glass balls and some are rubber. And you got to be very clear which ones for you are rubber balls that if it drops, it's not going to smash. It's going to bounce right back up and I'll catch it and I'll do stuff with it. But there's stuff which when you drop, you don't get a second chance.
It will shatter.
Yeah, it shatters. So I guess that's like, so which one is the glass ball for you, you know? And I would say like mental health is glass ball, don't mess with it. Yeah,
I agree. I think also being in a space where it's safe enough to talk about. And it's safe enough to put that worth on the table. You know, I appreciate that. Being able to say, hey, this is right now what's worthy for me. And not to say I demand so and so, but it's a negotiation, right? But you're not going to be able to negotiate until you put it on the table. So that is scary. I remember negotiating certain things, and that is a scary piece of work. I think in saying all of this, right, I don't want anybody to walk away from this podcast thinking, oh, but it's not so easy like that. But I genuinely felt scared at one point to put my voice in the table, to share with my higher ups what's going on for me. And I think it's always worth a try. At most it's a no, and if it's a no, then it's a conversation about, okay, then what's next? Is this the right space for me?
I think what I definitely appreciate from working with my team of millennials / pseudo Gen Z right, is that and I have to give thanks to the pandemic, which was horrendous, but at least one thing it normalized is talking about mental health and making that of worth to discuss. And because mental health enters the conversation on the table, at the team level, we can talk about, all right, if you take on this role, like how much time can you put in, how much energy can you put in, and what other support systems and processes can we put in so that everyone can do work that's worthy, you know, it's worth talking about. And because of that, that's why at a team level, we do have like a shared fund, which like anyone can like dip into to go for like therapeutic help and no questions asked and all that. And that is an outcome of people in the team. That means it's not just the top, but like everyone being okay with it. Because even if, let's say, I decided, okay, we're just going to have that, but if it's not normalized, like we can talk about it and no one's going to take up the fun. Yeah, but because it's normalized, it's like that becomes an extra place we can go to. Yeah. So I would definitely like really, really encourage anyone listening. Like if you do have if you do have issues to bring up to your system and you do have peers who share that concern, you never know where your voice can lead, you know. Share it with like a safe leader and put that worthy conversation on the table, because you never know what you can create. You want to change things that are not working in the system and in the organization, and that is beyond management. That is a call to leadership. Yeah.
And I think even on that note, you never know what someone else might not even factor as a thing to think about. So I think recently one of our teammates said, "Hey, Shao, can we do this? And it was never something that I thought about as a concern or a thing that I could even ask for. But because they put it on the table and it was important to them, it could have been it was a conversation that Shao could consider for the team. And I think that made me think about, okay, if whatever is important to me is important to me, it could be important to someone else too.
Yeah.
And I'm not being selfish. I'm not being demanding. I'm not being too much. But it could benefit more than myself. Yeah.
When you put your worth on a table, you give someone permission to put me too. I see that as worthy too. And then that's also how you also get the strength by numbers. Like, oh, all right, so this is a good thing to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. You know, just now you were mentioning about negotiating payments or things like that. And I was thinking about how I wasn't thinking about pay per se, but how when I was applying for the job at Kontinentalist, I was actually super clear about what I needed in terms of not job support or whatever, but I actually said I want this job, but actually I want to be able to take a 2-month no pay sabbatical within 6 months of joining. Are you okay with that? And I was really quite scared to ask for it. But actually, weirdly enough, negotiating for a job offer is the first time you actually realize that it's made very clear. We are all talking about our worth at this point and what we can offer each other. And this is what I feel like I can ask for. What do you think? And it's actually quite an uncomfortable conversation if you think about it. But it's quite normalized in terms of getting a job and interviewing things. But sometimes I think about that conversation as being very uncomfortable, but actually it needn't be. It's more about how do you normalize it. We think about it as quite normal when it comes to job offers and negotiating pay and things like that. So how can that similar conversation happen even after you've gotten the job and you might need something new this time? How do you ask for it knowing that you do have worth, right? So you're not just asking for something and you're more than what you are meant to. So I thought that's quite interesting and made me reflect on when to ask for things and that it's not a bad thing.
And it's not too much to ask.
No, it's not too much to ask.
It makes me think about one of the good things about short contracts is that the negotiation is forced.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and it's a clear boundary of okay, so are we still in or are we still out? And what would it take to keep me in? And because you're right, people may be more ready to bring their honest A game to the conversation if it's a negotiation point. But if you're on one of those indefinite contracts, I don't know, I could be here forever, right? Some people get a bit complacent after a while. They don't know how to have that conversation. And they assume that someone's going to think of my trajectory on my behalf when that's not necessarily true. So that is one of the things I realized over time, that is a good thing about short contracts. Although it's not always perceived as a good thing.
That's very true. Well, it's also because job appraisals are very scary, right? So you don't think of it as a place you can voice out certain wants. Because you think of it as this person is going to appraise me. Feels very one-sided sometimes. But if it's more of a conversation and those expectations can be articulated, then maybe might be better.
Better, exactly. And better, if not, it's just a no.
Exactly.
I think on that note, we can start to wrap this conversation. I think what I'm getting out of it is that we have a voice, we are important, we are not too much, even if it doesn't feel like it all the time. But even if we don't ourselves remember that, I think what I encourage everybody to do is to remind your peers that, and your team that, and your tops that. I think we have a lot of support as the middles and the bottoms because we work closely with each other. But I'm guessing and I'm assuming it's my own story that the top must feel quite lonely sometimes.
Yeah.
No, it's a true phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So while we can support each other, we, I guess, can also take some time and spend some energy to support our tops.
Yes.
By leading, not just managing.
Yes, that's the biggest favor the middles can do.
Yeah. So with the episode on Put Your Worth on the Table, I want to end with one thing you want to put on the table. What is one thing Nabilah, Shao, and I want to put on the table in terms of what we are finding worthy today? About ourselves, about our team, about our organization, about anything. This silence is thinking.
Yeah, it's a thinking silence.
I realize on podcast you can't see us.
Yeah, it's like we're trying to dig into our souls for the best answer.
The good enough answer.
Okay, I'll go with the one that came first. I am appreciative of psychological safety in a team. The kind of psychological safety that gives you, there's a lot of joy in working together, and there's also not being afraid to challenge or disagree with each other. I think that's a bit priceless. And some days I still have to remind myself that that is one of the most worthwhile and valuable things I have right now. Beyond anything. Yeah.
Mine is actually an image. Is that okay?
Yeah, totally.
Because I was thinking about this like visible, invisible dynamic.
Yeah.
And I don't think one is better than the other. And so the image I have in my mind is like of like a embroidery kind of thing, and how, you know, sometimes the stitches are visible and that's the one everyone sees and that's pretty, and you know, it can be different colors or like, you know, 3D or whatever, different things. But then the stitches at the back are also really important.
Yeah.
And you know, they hold things together. They may not be as pretty, but they're doing some important work in terms of like, I don't know,
Holding the fort.
holding the fort.
Yeah.
And I feel like it's like, how do you, if you're always at the back of it, like how do you sometimes give yourself permission to be visible and articulate your worth? And sometimes that could look like writing a post on LinkedIn and like talking about something that you're really proud of, which sometimes people think of negatively, but it's actually pretty important sometimes. But also equally, like if you're feeling less, if you don't want to be perceived by the world for certain reasons, you hide under like some kind of invisibility and support from the back. And that's really important as well. So for me, part of the middle manager thing is kind of doing both, but also knowing when to kind of make a change and give other people the opportunity to step forward as well. Yeah, so it's a beautiful embroidery.
Yeah, that's actually very true. Because you can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
You literally need both of them. And you need the blank canvas as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. I think I'm appreciative of the relational work that we're doing with each other. And it's not always about the tasks. It's about the people, the humans, the relationships, the care, the trust. And that cannot happen mutually exclusively. They have to all happen simultaneously. And yeah, like you said, invisible work is also important work and should be acknowledged and should be appreciated. Yeah.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's much to close here, except like if you are listening to this, and I hope you're taking copious notes on, just lean out of your imposter syndrome for long enough to see that all the things that you don't want could be telling you what's worthy to talk about. Yeah, just as much as like what you want. And put that on the table sometime this week whenever you're listening. Just practice small steps and you never know where you'll lead. So on that note, thank you for listening.
See ya next episode.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.